are listening to KMMU. That is Main Street Media, Utah Radio. And we're so happy to have you join us. And I am your host today, Delane England. This is the Liberty Moms Show. Liberty Moms are the original secretaries of defense. We are the real defenders of the freedom and defenders of our nation, our communities, and we are there when it comes to defending our families and our communities. And I have another amazing Liberty Mom with us. Her name is Carrie Bartholomew. She is really on the front lines. She is such a Liberty lady, and I love that I get to call her my friend. I have really enjoyed getting to know her in my association, and it has come from her being on the front lines, standing up, standing out, and standing up for us. And I have loved Carrie since the first moment that I met her because she's just full of life, full of energy, bubble, just positive, so happy, and really such a great example. And I am very happy to announce that she is also running for the state school board and in Utah, and she is a phenomenal candidate. And not just because she's my friend, she's because I have friends that I wouldn't want to be on the state school board. Let's be honest. They're friends. I love them to pieces, but I do not want them anywhere near the state school board. But Carrie she knows her stuff. She knows education and she knows how it's been impacted. And so the reason that I invited Carrie to be on our show today was to really talk about education, what is happening in our schools, because what I do know from talking to many moms and dads that have children in public school, they have no idea what is going on in our public schools. It is shocking. It's disturbing. It is unbelievable, in my opinion. And it's time for us to take our schools back. Because even if you don't have kids in school, the kids in school are our future. They impact our future. They are the people that will be our future leaders. And they're the ones who marry our children and our grandchildren. And they're the leaders. So it is very important that we engage and fix our public schools. So Carrie, welcome. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm in
And
my car.
I know you're teaching and you're just running around with your own family, and that, I'm so happy that we could slice out this minute between classes and after you got through with your last class. So we're just delighted that you could take time to be with us.
Thanks. It's my pleasure.
I want to ask you one question, and I want to know, where did you learn so much about the Constitution, Carrie?
By digging into it, part of it is because I work for American Preparatory Academy.
Yes.
And they do the Constitution every year.
Yes, they teach it.
Right. Yes. And we actually read the entire thing every September.
Yes, you do.
So that's a huge part. But then, of course, you get into the nuances at events like yours, like Freedom Lights, where
that's ours, Carrie.
Yes. Okay. Right. So you get into it there, and then you just start to realize that, my goodness, the country that we have right now is just not the country that it was designed to be. And that is a really sad thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not the country it used to be. And yet we have the principles, we have the foundation, we have the Constitution in place that we can just restore those principles back and have, voila, the country we used to have. We can have more prosperity, more freedom and liberty, and be able to govern ourselves if we reinstitute and reenact the principles that it was founded on. And that's what is really great about you, is you understand those principles and you're striving so hard. You're on the front lines working to restore those. So what do you think? Yeah, and it's always just fun to learn, where did people learn about the Constitution? Because that is kind of, I think you would probably agree, my mission in life, one of my missions is to educate people on the Constitution. And so I love to find people that have, just sourced it out. It's always really interesting and fun where people found it and then they recognize truth and they attach to it and they just started building on it. And you're one of those people.
I had this moment. I was at Moms for America, and I was at their convention in Texas, and I got to meet Elijah O'Neill, who was a young man. He works with Turning Point, and he works in Glenn Beck's actual museum.
Mhm.
And when he talks about the Constitution, and he's just a young guy, but when he
Yes.
talks about the Constitution, as a biracial man whose heritage he can trace back to slavery, mine you can't, but for him you can, and just how he talks about how specifically when they were writing about that subject, they left it to the very end and they gave it the most amount of space, and he said it was obvious that this is something that the founding fathers wanted.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the first round, it didn't work out so well, but they at least
Yeah.
had that intention. And I thought that was just beautiful. Like, can we please bring back a full, in-depth story of our country, not a revised story of our country.
Exactly. Yes, because really none of the founding fathers and mothers were perfect, but most of them were so amazing. And by far, most of them absolutely hated slavery. But again, they weren't born hating it. They were
Right,
enlightened. They learned because they grew up, at that time in the 1770s. Those people had, been exposed to it, although so many at that time had really seen how they realized it was unchristian, it was ungodly, it was immoral. Most of them totally were absolutely against slavery. There was
right,
just a few states who just and I mean, I don't pretend to know if they knew or recognized or they wanted to, they had cognitive dissonance. They chose to not to pretend like it wasn't a problem because of money. We
right,
see that greed and that money and how we tend to rationalize our own bad behavior and justify it. And I'm like, that is nothing new with them. It is still going on today. They didn't invent it. It was happening long before then. But the fact that most of the people in America found slavery truly not, unaligned and absolutely just immoral. Just no
right,
other word. And they voiced it. They were out there telling people. And yeah, they were doing what they could. They wanted to be a united nation. They wanted to have unanimity. They wanted every state was very important unanimously to vote for the Constitution. They thought, well, let's give it 20 years. We can by attrition. Because let's face it, if you've already got slavery in
right,
place, which they did, once you violate a principle, how difficult it is. You can see how difficult it is to right the ship once you violate that principle to get back on. But they thought, well, it will go down. It will just kind of die out. We can kind of get rid of it in 20 years. And in fact, it grew, it didn't reduce. And
right,
that's something that I think is a very important principle that we can all learn from.
right,
You've got to work very hard to get rid of something bad. You can't just think it's just going to go away. Bad doesn't go away. Evil does not leave. It drills down. And
exactly.
yeah. So yeah, I think we have this amazing good, bad, ugly, and beautiful history. And let's just share all of it. Let's share all of it because we
Absolutely.
can learn so much from the successes, but man, can we learn so much from the failures or the mistakes? I know personally, I learn a lot from my mistakes.
Right,
I try not to repeat them, but I know that I really learn a lot from them and sometimes far more from our mistakes, but I never want to repeat them. And
right.
so, this gives us an opportunity to learn those things. So, Carrie, tell us, like, as an educator, you've got children, you also teach. What do you think is the problem with our current public education system? I know there's more than one, but like, you go
Right.
where you want to with that.
Okay, I would say that it goes into what how I started off. I believe that what we're heading into is
Mhm.
a recolonization. And what I
Yes.
mean by that is that we're changing the ideas, traditions, values within the walls of our schools through products, through curriculums and supplemental things like ethnic studies, equity clubs, different ideas like this that people think what they're being sold, what's being marketed to them is not what it really is. And ultimately, what we're doing is teaching our children to other each other. Whether that comes in race, whether that comes in gender, whether that comes in faith groups, we are teaching that there are some groups that are correct
Mhm.
and other groups that are not, and that you must change your values, which is simply not the rule of public education, not the role of public education.
No, it isn't. It shouldn't be. It
No,
shouldn't be. It's not the role. I love what you said. It's not the role of the public education.
right.
Okay, so you have been right on the front lines and very spoken out very succinctly and articulately about DEI. And I have found as I've talked to parents, I'm kind of surprised, but you know how it is. We live in an echo chamber. You know, we know what we know, and we just think that everyone else knows it. So let's tell people what DEI is: diversity, equity, and inclusion. What that means, and then let's talk about what you would say is the problem with DEI in our schools.
Sure. So diversity, when people think of diversity, they think, oh, we all look different, we all think differently, we're all welcome at the table. That's diversity. It's the opposite. So, right now, as I'm running, the people who are not endorsing me are the people who would promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Coming from my background, and
Oh dear, we just lost Carrie. I'm sure she'll call us right back. So we'll work on getting her back on. Yeah, so she's saying DEI, diversity. Are we not all in favor of diversity? I love diversity. I mean, that is truly America. We're all about diversity. We're so different. We're so just very diverse and very different from each other. And especially as free thinkers, we love that. And that, you know, there isn't an American race. There's no such thing. Like, what is your race? America is every race. Every race is American. And don't you love that? That is awesome. But they're using the word diversity, which is very broad and very, we love diversity. We're in, I think most of us would agree we're in favor of it. But they're using it as a weapon against and actually making it so only a certain segment of group is included and that it excludes a different segment. So it's using the word diversity when it's really saying we want only a certain segment to have certain rights or certain privileges or to educate with teaching that a certain race of people are victims and others are perpetrators upon the other races, and that's really a problem. That's very problematic. um, Inclusion, we I don't know anybody, I really don't know anybody personally who's not in favor of inclusion. Like, who thinks let's exclude a certain group of people, whether it's race or whether it's religion or even thought process? Do we not want to have include everyone in America that's here legally to be included in our debate discussions, and even those that are not here legally certainly can be included in those in discussions. Of course, we don't want them included in voting, and I would like to include them in coming here legally, not coming here illegally, because we love to have immigrants come here. We have plenty of room, but we just need to know who they are. So we just need them to come here in the front door. But inclusion sounds like a really good thing, and I think that most of us would agree we want to be very inclusive. But again, the word is weaponized, and it is not used to include people. It is very much used to divide people and to pit people against each other. We're only going to include this segment. We're breaking people up, clustering them into little boxes and putting them in little silos, and then saying, this is inclusion. You have to include them, but they don't have to include you. It's very one-sided and one way, and that's not good for America. It's not good for anybody, and it's actually not good for the people who are included that are excluding others, because it's not really serving them either. And then equity, which is really important because we've always discussed equality. America, we have equality. Each one of us is equal in rights, in the way we're treated, in purpose. We each have individual God given rights, and we're equal to the same opportunities and the same treatment under the law. But equity, on the other hand, is measuring the outcome. It's making equal the outcome, and that is completely not only un-American, but again, it's not really good for anybody, because we don't all want the same outcomes. We don't all want the same things. Some people want this. Some people really want a specific job. Others would not like that at all. Some want to have a lot of money. Others want peace and they want tranquility, or they want, a home that's by a river or a brook or in a rural area. Others want a really nice house in the city. So everybody wants something very different. What we want is very diverse and very different. So we don't want the outcomes measured by or what we are entitled to or what we get measured by the outcome. We want it measured by the income, that we all have equal opportunities. So those are really important. And Carrie, I was hoping that she would be able to join us. I know that she just came back from school and teaching school, and she was probably didn't have really good reception. So hopefully she'll be back soon. But this is being perpetrated in our schools in Utah. A lot of people think, oh, it's not in Utah. It's not really happening here in Utah. But I'm here to tell you, DEI is happening in Utah. And it is teaching that if you are white, born a certain way that you can't control or help, you can't repent of it, you can't overcome it, that you are, by the virtue of being born white, you are naturally and integrally racist. And there is nothing you can do to fix it. Well, my experience would be very, very different than that. I have found that, as I said, I grew up in Utah mostly, and I found I didn't experience racism. Of course, I'm white, so I didn't experience it because most people are white. So of course that makes sense, right? Everybody kind of like, of course you didn't. But I never noticed, I never saw an incident where one of my friends who was of a different race suffer racism. Now, that doesn't mean it didn't happen, because I'm sure that it did. I'm sure it happened. But we all have something. I was mocked and teased and ridiculed for having red hair, for having freckles, for being ugly. I mean, I got mocked and ridiculed and discriminated against, but it wasn't for my race. So I do understand it's painful, and I do understand it's real. But we grew up in a society where really no one really noticed. I'm not saying they weren't exceptions, but as a rule, we liked each other, we loved each other, we didn't care. It was so irrelevant about a race. And I feel like our country wanted to prove that racism was virtually gone, that we would really overcome it as a whole, not individually, not every single person, but as a whole, we would really, really taken such great measures to overcome it. And I feel like we voted for Barack Obama as a nation twice to show we were not discriminatory, that we did not feel negatively towards our brothers and sisters of a different race, that we love them, we care about them, they're important, and they're just the same as any other Americans. And so I felt like we really tried to make that a statement. And unfortunately, what it actually did is it opened the door to have a lot of DEI and a lot of these movements that gave power and a voice to a great deal of racism, which is really sad, because I think it perpetrated it rather than helped it to go away even more or die down. And another one of the problems that I would like to speak about that is in education until we get Carrie back, which I think is just one of the most severe and serious problems that we have, is the pornography in our schools. I am so disturbed by it, and I'm very upset by it. And the reason is because, I find pornography not only vile, I find it's just a violation of what's good for humans. And the thing is, when adults are exposed to pornography with an adult mind and they choose to overcome it and stop it, the brain that's already developed, then when you get addicted, or you expose the brain, or you expose yourself to things like that, you can overcome that. It's hard, it's not easy, but it's very doable, and people do it. But what is so difficult is, and we have so much scientific evidence and research and proof that this is true, as well as lots of people you can ask, when a child or a minor is exposed to pornography, they can easily be addicted the very first time they're exposed. And what we do know is that exposure to it, and especially multiple exposures, children, and the uncompleted mind that's still developing, that's not in its full capacity, that mind gets addicted so much faster, so much easier, and very hard to overcome addiction. It's so much more difficult to overcome addiction. That is, and we're really subjecting children to a lifetime of addiction. That's just so heartbreaking, very hard. So then this child, when they grow up, has so much more of a difficult time to ever be a contributing member of society or be free of this addiction. And I really want to invite you to call in, but my problem is I don't have the phone number memorized, so that makes it really hard. So if I can find the phone number, I'm going to share it with you, and then you can call in and talk. And hopefully, Carrie will be back shortly. So the pornography, and I think most people do not believe there's pornography in school, or they think it's so minimal. But where pornography is huge, it's very big in the library. It's big in the books. It's depends on the teacher and the school and the district as to how much it is infused in the curriculum. But I promise you, no matter what state you live in, no matter what school district you live in, if your kids are going to public school, they have access, massive access to pornography in books. And I am talking about a lot of text pornography, drawings, not necessarily photographs, but drawings that depict hardcore pornography and the explicit descriptions. And they're vile. I don't really know a nice way to say it, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, and I also don't want to understate it, but it's vile. It's not at all pleasant, or it's not like reading a romance novel. It's not like that at all. It's really vile. And our kids are being subjected to it, and it's causing them to question who they are, question their own sexuality, question what they want in life. And it's shattering. It's really not good for our society. So that is a thing that I think we really need to work on. And one of the sources that you have in order to check this out is called ratedbooks. Oh gosh, I can't remember if it's .com or .org, but it's rated, RATED, books.org. I'm pretty sure it's .org, but either way, it's either one of those. But if you Google rated books, it will come up. And then you can look on there and it will bring up the school districts, all the school districts, and then it tells you and bring that up. It will show the cover and list the books in your school district that are pornographic. And some wonderful, amazing, liberty-loving mom has gone into the schools. It was a team of people that have gone in and they have found these books, they have read them, they have found the actual places where this pornography is. They have listed the book number, the title, and then they've listed the pages where it is. So you can just go through and so you can find it that you want it, but then you can get it removed from your school. There's a huge process. It should be very simple and very easy. Every superintendent, every school board chair, president of every school board has the power and authority to go in there and just look at those books and just go in and take them out. Because if a book is inappropriate to be on radio, for me to open that book and read it, and I would not only be fined, I could go to jail for it, or for the FCC, if it violates the FCC, if it can't be on television or the radio or spoken in public. If I took those books, I read it to the little kid across the street, or I saw a kid at the stop sign and I read it to them, I would be arrested. Why would that book be in our schools? What would be the reason that any book like that could possibly be in our schools? It's just unbelievable. And that we don't have leaders and people that are willing and that have stepped up to remove that. So I just ask you, as this is the election season, as we're dealing with the so many candidates, so we're dealing with both the county conventions and the state conventions. If you are a delegate, I would invite you to do your research and to find out. You're really going to have to vet the candidates, because what I have found is every single candidate is saying they're conservative. And I tell you, I know for certain a lot of those candidates, I guarantee you, are not conservative. I don't know how they justify it or why they even say it, because in their actions, they have been very open that they are not conservative. one of our chair of our Davis school district right now has told me numerous times, I'm not conservative like you, Delane. I'm just not conservative. And yet on her material, she puts conservative. I'm like, well, why are you saying you're conservative now when you've, for the last 4 years or 8 years, said you're not conservative? It's very interesting. But you have to do more than ask them. You're going to have to look at their history, ask for proof of what they're saying when they say I'm conservative. Based on what? What is the proof that you're a conservative? Please give me some evidence. And I have some questions that I think are very helpful to help you vet candidates. So I'm going to list some questions. So I invite you, if you would like these questions, and even if you're not a delegate, if you're a citizen, you will be voting. And these are great questions for you also to vet candidates. And so you might want to write some of these questions down. And first of all, I'm going to talk about questions for the state school board, because the state school board spends the biggest chunk of our entire state budget. More of our state money goes to our public education than anything else. And not all of us have kids in public school. A lot of people don't. Both either they've aged out or they have their kids in homeschool or private school. And so it matters to all of us, though, as I was talking about. It influences, it impacts our entire culture and our society and all of the other children that live in this. If you put your kids in private school or you homeschool them, it doesn't mean they're not going to be associating with kids in public school. So it matters to all of us what is being taught. So what some of the questions that you can ask, there are programs and appropriations that expand the proper role of government. Would you be in favor of that or against it? And things like that. I think it's important for you to keep in mind. The federal Constitution lists in Article 1, Section 8, it's very clear. It lists very concisely and clearly what is the proper role of government. It says exactly what the government is to do. The federal government is to protect our rights, period. Their only job is to protect our rights. They are to pass laws to protect our rights, not to govern us, to protect our rights. The executive branch is to secure our borders and to protect us against domestic invasion and domestic terrorism. And so that's the job of our executive branch, of our president. And the Supreme Court is to interpret the laws that we have, again, to secure our freedoms. And make sure that everything that is passed is aligned with our Constitution, and it is constitutional. So yeah, find out and look at their record and see what they've done in the past. Have they done things, if they have a history, which everybody does one way or another? Have they been in favor of things that expand the government, or are they in favor of shrinking the power of the government or keeping it in the proper role of the government? And so watch for people who want appropriations or to expand the power of the government. There also the federal Constitution actually forbids the federal government from being involved in education. Now we have 4 laws that also forbid that, but there's no real power authority for the federal government to be involved in education. And yet we have this massive building, if you've ever seen it in DC, huge, massive building, Board of Education, Federal Board of Education. Shouldn't even exist. We shouldn't be funding it. We shouldn't even have it, but we certainly shouldn't fund it, which is the best way to get rid of it. But we receive 9% of our education budget is funded from the federal government. So that's how they actually do it, is they say, well, they don't pass laws regarding education. They just dangle a carrot and say, hey, you know what? We'll give you this money if you do this. And I guarantee you, almost without exception, to do what they want is to cost more than the amount of money they pay us to do it. So that's not really a very smart idea. So, but you implement something that costs you more to implement it. It doesn't make you any money, and it costs more to implement it than what they give you to do it. That doesn't make sense. That's not wise. So that's another thing. Do we want to support policies, programs that support the growth of the LEAs, or the education, the strength, or the ties and connections to the federal government with our education system? Do we want, okay, this is really important, and I know a lot of people think this is a great idea, but I just ask you to stop and ask yourself and think through this. Do you want the schools to be the place where psychological treatment or psychological surveys or I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the word that I want, but when you diagnose, do you want schools? Is that the place you want psychological diagnosis to happen? Is that where you want psychological treatments to happen? Schools were originally designed to educate on knowledge, religion, and morality. According to the founding fathers, according to um, the Northwest Ordinance, it says right in there, the schools are supposed to do three things: educate for knowledge, religion, and morality. That's their is religion, morality, and knowledge. It was actually religion first, morality second, and knowledge third. And so that's really the role. So do you think that we should have all these programs that are adjusting or assessing the psychological makeup of our students? They're actually causing these psychological breakdowns, and then they're assessing them and diagnosing them and then wanting to treat them. Is the school the place that should be assessing all this nutrition? Now, I'm way into nutrition myself, so of course I want schools to be a place where students can get nutrition when it comes to lunch, because if you're going to stay that long, you want to get lunch. And parents really have the role of the responsibility of feeding their own children. That should come. And if they want to ask the schools to supplement that or to support that, that's fine. I'm very against a breakfast or dinners being given or passed out at schools, because it isn't the role of government and it is not the role of education or our schools. That's a parental role and a parental responsibility. And do you ever notice that when the schools take on that responsibility, what happens to the parents? The parents start to give that power and authority to the schools and start to relinquish their own stewardship as parents. We don't want to do that. The family is the foundation of society. It's very important that the family remains intact and remains that foundational structure. Parents, please don't give your stewardship over to anybody else, and especially to public schools. And so, again, behavior, like we definitely want the schools to support and to expect a very good behavior in the public schools. But we want that supported, and we don't want schools coming between parents and between their children. That is not the role of schools. One really big push, not only nationally but internationally, but it's a really big push in the United States of America, and that's to turn our schools into medical facilities. They want to have the schools be the place where you take your kids for psychological treatment and medical treatment, and that's just where, and that the schools, while your kid's there, they're going to perform all the medical tests, they're going to take care of them medically, they're going to do all this. Again, they're going to give them shots, vaccines, their eyes, all of these things, their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner. This is really overstepping, and it's like, can you imagine how overwhelming it is for educators? Like, I'm trying to teach history here. I'm trying to teach English and teach knowledge. But do we have time for the schools to be handling medical services? That is really such a personal issue that absolutely should be handled by the parents outside of the school, by in a medical facility. So that is not just my belief, but it's right because it's my belief, right? So just kidding. But it's something I would love you to consider and think about. Is that how we really want it? Is that we want our society? Because the more you give that, the schools are controlled by the government, the more information, the more power, the more stewardship you give to the government. What do? They do use that power wisely, or do they often, almost always or without exception, do they usurp that power and authority over us, and do they often use it inappropriately? So make sure that you're in favor of that, because I am absolutely not in favor of it. I do not want the schools to do anything but teach religion, morality, and knowledge, and leave the rest up to me as a parent or up to the parents. There's also a lot of data-driven policies that are in public school. And they go, oh, we have the data on it. We have the data on it. Common Core is one. But I want, you can make data say what you want it to. And I love data. Data is great. But we want to be sure that it's they're not using the data of our children and grandchildren to sell it, to push another agenda, to give it to someone else, or to use it inappropriately, or to track us, or to track our children. See how important that information about our kids is, vitally important. And it's also very personal and should not be shared with a single soul. And I'm even just concerned about our schools having all that information, because that can be hacked. It can be used inappropriately. It can be used to punish or weaponize against our children. And so I, again, would ask that you be very careful in making that decision. And when you're voting for people, these are the kinds of things you want to know right where they stand. It shouldn't be hard to answer, and it's not complicated. When someone says it's complicated, then please don't vote for them. It's not complicated. It's not complicated to say, no, it's not the role of the schools. They shouldn't be doing it. Common Core is another one. It's just Common Core has been a nightmare from the very beginning, and was a mistake. And people did not, it was really hard to get people to stand up against it. But I think people now are able to see a lot of the problems in Common Core and how it really dumbed down our education system. Another thing is the nonprofits, the non-government agencies, and the public-private partnerships. Government has a role and a responsibility. They get the money from the taxpayers to do this, and they have limited power. They have very limited power. Businesses, you get to buy in. You get to decide if you want to give business that personal information or if you want to do business with them. So that's self-governing. Never should the two be mixed, intertwined with each other. That is a public-private partnership, allows private business to do stuff that they should never do and do not have the power to do without the government. It also allows the government to do things they couldn't do without the businesses. Those things need to stay totally separate and remain autonomous so that we don't have a collection of power, which we know always ends disastrously and always ends in tyranny. So we want to keep power decentralized and broken up so that no one or small group has the power to take everything back. So keep that in mind, please. What about the role of parents in education? Are parents the primarily most important role in education, or are they put on the back, on the sidelines, pushed in the back? I just had a really interesting conversation with somebody that I love so much, just adore her and respect her. She's gone from being a mother to being a teacher. And so she was telling me how the principal did not send with the teacher, but they threw the teacher on the bus. She was very upset by it. And I don't support a principal in throwing a teacher under the bus. I agree. Any kind of reprimands or discussions or debates should happen in private, not in front of the parents. But the role of the principal, and including the superintendent, in my opinion, should be to support the family and support the children, but support the family in having stewardship and say and control over their children's education. It isn't to protect the teachers. The teachers are adults. They can protect themselves. Teachers have the ability as adults to protect themselves, to stand up for themselves, to speak for themselves. Children do not have that. So again, I think we want principals to not only do what's right, but to be very aware and awake and make sure that they are standing for and protecting teachers and children, the students, the children, and their parents. That it really is not only a parent's responsibility, it is a parent's right, and it is their responsibility to take care of their children's education. And that the schools should be there to support it, not replace it. What about voluntary consent to data privacy, to any kind of programs? Should they have to opt in case by case, or should they just, like the beginning of the year, they opt into everything the schools want to do? Think of how dangerous that is. That's, again, centralization of power. So parents should be opting in to every single instance, to everything their kids are subjected to every field trip, to have their kids go to an event. It should all be done by parental supervision. Okay, one of the most important issues is transgenderism. Our children are being socially engineered. They're being really there's a social contagion that is happening, but there is a real thing of it's real. Gender dysphoria is real and it's a problem and it's very sad. But it is, again, not, there is no such thing as changing your sex. It can't happen. So we don't want the schools coming between the parents and their children. The schools should not be interjected there. They should be supporting truth, and they should be supporting the unification and the the unity of the family. And so we would ask teachers to not get in between the parents and their children, and not to hide. Oops, sorry. Not to hide or keep information from the parents that's happening at school. Parents have every right to be fully informed. They're paying for it. They're choosing it. They have every right to know what's going on with their children. They're minors. We call them minors for a reason, because they're minors. They're underage, and parents should have a right to know everything that's going on and have that information. Boys are boys, and boys should not be going into the girls' bathrooms. They should not be playing on girls' sports. They should not be going into girls' showers. No matter how much they believe they're a girl, they're not. And they shouldn't be going into girls' private spaces. They should be going into the boys' private spaces, or have their own private spaces, which is fine. Some schools can afford that and some cannot. But if they can't, they should not be going into girls' spaces at all under any circumstances. I think parents also need to be very aware of the data that is being collected. Do you agree? And ask the candidates, do they agree with this data collection, or should there be parameters on it being collected in the first place, where it's stored, how it's stored, who has access to it, and can it be hijacked? Can it be stolen? And if it's stored, it can be stolen. If you can put it there, someone can get it out. So the less we store information, the better. The more free we are, and the more freedom we have. So I would highly recommend that we don't store a lot of information in one place. And we really have a right to freedom from divulging a lot of information based on Amendment 4. All right, and then we talked about sexually explicit materials. Okay, fair enough. I just need to know that I have been 2 nights totally sleep deprived, so I apologize. I don't even feel like falling asleep, but I think I need more oxygen. So our kids are so subjected to sexually explicit materials, and when we elect somebody, I think that's one of the most important questions. Like, what are you going to do to get it out of our schools? How are you going to engage? Are you just going to go along? You're just like, well, there's nothing I can do. Are you going to go in there and get it out? Are you going to go take care of it and get it out? Okay, I'm so thrilled that we got Carrie back. Carrie, we were just discovered, so sad to lose you. I was just talking about some of the things that people can do, both delegates and non-delegates, and people that are running for office, and questions that they can ask. And okay, so people ask you the questions, Carrie, you're going to give the right answers because it's true. And I know that with you, because I know you and I know where you stand, and I've seen it. I've seen your fruits. So I know, like, you're not just going to say it. I know what you really believe in. But what can someone do? Do you have any advice for, like, you ask your opponent, where do you stand on this? Your opponent is probably going to give a lot of good answers. How does someone distinguish between what someone says and what they actually do? It's hard to find the records of state school board votes. It's very difficult. I watch up there, I see, so I'm very aware of a lot of them. I know where your opponent stands. But how does a regular citizen and voter, how do they know? Do you have any advice?
Sure. My friend Brooke Stevens created the app Amplify, and that really makes it nice and clear. It's a free app. You can get on and you can see as much information that there is based on your candidate. The other thing is that, I mean, you're right. It is very hard to find out where people stand. What I have found, there are 3 of us in my race, and
There's 3 in your what?
there's 3 in
In
my
your
race.
race. Yes,
So,
there's 3 in your
there's 3
race.
of us. Okay.
Yes.
And the reason that any of us are running against an incumbent is because the incumbent doesn't represent our values. other I'm not somebody who wants to jump into politics. It
Right.
comes down to, are
Yeah.
you going to do what the people expect of you? And I'm sorry, but the answer there is no. It hasn't happened, and we're not in a place. We're in a place where we can vote for people who will placate and tell us there's nothing to see here, close your eyes, go back to sleep, or we can vote for people who protect. That's where we're at right now. And our kids do need protection. I would love to get on here and talk about sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, right? But I heard a little bit of what you were saying, and absolutely, there's gender stuff in our schools at the youngest ages. And what people need to understand is that is ultimately the goal. So
Yes, it is.
a lot of the curriculums that we're bringing in, under the name of being inclusive, their goal is gender. So while there are people, and while social media does play a part, a lot of this stuff, I almost said all, but I don't want a blanket statement, but a
Right.
lot of this stuff pulls into gender, genderism, confusing your child about gender, because then they have autonomy from their families. If their families don't
Exactly.
support, you can separate them. And
Yes.
so it has nothing to do with being cruel or unkind to people. It has everything to do with not destroying the role of families. So, um, and that's really the discussion. Like, a lot of parent groups, or a lot of teacher groups will say, like, parents for teachers, and you just have to ask the question: where's the kid involved in that? Where are the students involved in these conversations? If, when you're
Mhm.
talking, you can't see a voting record, but you see, I'm in full support of the UEA, well then please, parents, go to the UEA's website,
Yes.
knock down the first one, and you will see social justice objectives. Not educational objectives, but social
Exactly.
justice. And I did not know that until I just started looking. And as I'm looking, we don't know. I have so many delegates who will come to me and their eyes will open and they'll say, I didn't think this was in Utah. And I can show them, well, here's a paper of a third grader who's saying, I don't want to fill out this intersectionality flower.
Right.
Or a parent just called me and said she was reading to her fourth graders class, and the book she was supposed to read talked about how the white man came and took their moccasins and gave them black shoes. But it didn't say white man, it said white people, white people, white people, white people throughout the story. And she felt very uncomfortable. And I said, well, that's because the kids are being taught. I'm not saying that the story is not true, but the
Right.
kids are intentionally being taught to internalize the guilt, or to internalize that their classmate has guilt. That is what they're being taught, instead of saying, you know, the foreman, Mr. Smith, came and took our shoes and gave us moccasins, so that they can separate it. Or say that these people in this town did this. Instead, they say
Exactly.
white people, and they have to recognize that that's intentional. It is
Yeah.
intentional to instill in people guilt, because when they have guilt, they want to absolve themselves, and they will do whatever they have to absolve themselves. We have got all sorts of clubs right now. We've got affinity clubs. We've got clubs where you take the Native American kids out and put them in their traditional gear and call it becoming visible. And the problem isn't that you're embracing the culture. The problem is that you're telling the kid they weren't visible in the first place. You're saying you're not really visible until you do X, which really does bring them down to a social or critical consciousness. That's the goal. How can we get our kids obsessed with their immutable characteristics?
Oh, Carrie, that was so well said. Thank you so much. That is exactly right. That is there. It's a movement. It's a force. And let's not be naive and just think that could never happen in Utah, because they've infiltrated slowly, a little bit at a time. They did it using these amazing terms like DEI. I mean, diversity, equality, which dare say equity, inclusion. We're just like, Well, who would be against that? Those things sound wonderful.
Can I break that down? Like, that's what I was about to do before my
Yes, please
phone
do.
blew up.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so diversity means politicization. It means that we are now, everything has to be about politics.
Yes.
Equity means redistribution.
Mhm.
So it means let's give to take from some and give to others. Okay. And inclusion means access. So that means that you must give access, and it doesn't just mean a seat at the table. If it meant a seat at the table, I would absolutely be for it. But that's not the goal. The goal is to come into a situation to first say that I deserve access, and then after getting that access, to infuse it with your ideology until it is no more. So, what I was saying about DEI is I should be the first person they're championing. At the very least, they should be calling me and saying, "Hey, we want to interview you. We want to talk to you about
Mhm.
this stuff." And instead, they're like, "It cannot be Carrie Bartholomew. It
Yes, they
cannot
are
let me."
literally saying that. We do not want Carrie speaking, which is
Yes,
just fascinating. Talk about inclusion. No, they
right?
don't want you speaking because you're not speaking their narrative.
Yes, and
So
that's
they're
the point. The
excluding you 100%, and they are targeting anybody but. We do not want Carrie.
Yes, and that's the politicization. If you don't have the right kind of insight, the right way of knowing, you don't follow the mold,
Right.
you will be excluded in some of the most awful ways. I am reading with my kids right now as we're driving in the car, Red Scarf Girl.
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
People need to read it. People
Everyone needs to go read that book, and don't just read it. Think, how is this happening here now?
read it with a
The
highlighter.
reason to read it is like a liken it to yourself and go, oh my goodness. Because I have people read it. I require it of my students. I'm like giving it to everyone I know. I'm just like always on the mantra because you can learn so much from that. But liken it, look and see what you can learn from it. Thank you, Carrie. Great.
Right. I was talking to one of my students and I said, "Where do you see the parallels?" And I said, "Just take a highlighter and highlight what you see today versus back then." And one of my students said, "Just dip it in a vat of yellow paint." Like,
I
yeah,
love it. I
probably.
love it. That's great.
Yes. So,
Everywhere.
yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. If people step back when you use the term cultural revolution, I don't know if you saw what happened at Utah State this Monday when Knowles came. So Michael Knowles came to talk about the transgenderism, and the kids were out there protesting. And I looked at them, and I only saw it online. Actually, my nephew had went to it, and as I'm looking at this video, he's showing me. I'm thinking these kids are months away from Black Bloc. They are
Yeah,
months away from heading in that direction. And
they really are,
meanwhile,
and they don't know it.
no, they don't. They think they're being kind. They think they're
They
the kind ones
do.
as they chase people to their cars, bang on their windows, and yell and scream at them, "God doesn't love you."
Right. God
They
doesn't love you.
think,
I hope you get run over in the street. Like
yeah,
I heard someone
yeah.
said that.
So, and they don't know because our history was redwashed. And that's one of the things that I'm a huge advocate for. If I get on the school board, I want to talk about what's in our schools, what we're teaching for history. Why are we removing so much of our history?
Mhm.
Um, I, um, and especially why do they not know that the same tactics of social and emotional learning are social and emotional compliance. And all you have to do is spend some time on Castle's website, type in equity, dig in deep. And I know people tell me be the sunshine in the room. And I am that. And
You are.
I also recognize the problems, right? And so we have to address them because it's our children on the line.
It's our children, our grandchildren. It's our very future. We know that we can never regain these freedoms without
Right.
bloodshed if we lose them. And so it is time to stand up, and we can be happy warriors. And that's what I love about you,
Yes.
Carrie. You are a happy warrior. And I use the term in the most loving, kind
Right.
way, because I'm like, you're not out there like doing any destruction to anybody,
No.
but you're on the front lines in the trenches, but happy and just standing up for truth and righteousness. And that is the only way to really be happy. We are
Right.
not going to be happy in bondage. I'm
Right.
not going to be. I'm not, I don't enjoy bondage. It's not the human, it's not how we're meant to be.
Right.
So, okay. Thank you so much for bringing up Red Scarf Girl. And I love that comment. I'm going to share that. That's pretty funny. Okay. Are we through with kind of that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I want to be sure I don't cut you off
No, you're
there.
fine.
Okay, is there another issue? I kind of did talk about the pornography, and I had kind of forgotten. I'm so glad you reminded everyone. Go look up Amplify. Is that .org or .com?
I think it's Amplify USA,
Yeah, thank you.
and it's not either. It's an
It's not
app.
either.
It's specifically an app in the App Store.
Oh, it's just an app. Yeah, you're right. It's an app. It's an app. Amplify USA.
USA. Uh-huh.
And yes, go there. It is an amazing app. It is fantastic. It is such a great resource. And Brooke spent so much time. And I mean, she's amazing. She's just such an awesome person. And she's also the one that kind of started the ratedbooks.org. And so
Correct.
now she also has this app, Amplify USA. And that is, we have these tools, but we've got to let people know we have them, and we've got to use them. We just have to pick them up and use them. And that really does help, really will help to educate you and let you know what's going on. It is such a great resource. Thank you for reminding me, because I haven't used it for several weeks and I kind of forgot about it. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Yes.
And we have talked about the pornography. I did, while you were gone, I did talk about the pornography, which is ratedbooks.us.org, because I find pornography is one of the most serious, pornography and transgenderism, because transgenderism is designed by design to destroy our children, but also to destroy our future of being able to have children.
Right.
And my heart is broken for these kids who really sincerely suffer from gender dysphoria, and they deserve help and they need help. And it is so curable. It is really not even that hard. They need to get out of the social contagion. But if you find a child suffering with that, you don't even have to talk about transgenderism for 1 nanosecond. You don't even have to bring it up. They need to talk about what it was that happened in their life that they're hurt from. Where were they? Where did this wound happen?
Well, then it's not always hurt. Sometimes it really is the magna, which is like the comics. So the comics create a social contagion. Tumblr creates a social
Yes,
contagion.
right.
There's a really good. I watch and I speak on several different podcasts. But one of the ones that I watch is called Gender Through a Wider Lens. And it's wonderful because they're so compassionate
Yeah,
as they
good.
talk about this situation. And um I wish I could remember the other two. I know the Radical Center, which I'm regularly on. Critical Therapy Antidote. These are all, and right now they're doing a series about surviving, about parents who've survived and helped their kids get out of it. So
Uh-huh. And
um
kids do. There's a very high success rate if parents don't affirm, and they don't even have to be against it. They just have to not affirm and not get caught up in it. Very high success rate, which is once they get a little older and kind of grow up and their
right.
brain starts to get developed, which is why they target our children, because they know they won't choose this as adults. So they've got to target them while they're young and they're influential and easily sucked into this.
Well, and
So
we have.
that's
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
gender through a wider lens,
Hmm.
and and then
Critical Therapy Antidote.
critical therapy antidote
Yes. And then
therapy.
the one that I discuss a lot of education on, we went through the unions, the UEA's stuff just
Yes.
last week, is
Yes.
the Radical Center.
And
So
that, so that's such great advice because we think the UEA, it's just a union to support our teachers. It's really great. But if you go on and look and see what they have on their own website, they are not clandestine about it. They shine the light on themselves. So it's really easy to find. You don't have to do a lot of research, take a lot of time. What they're in favor of is very important to be aware of. Yeah,
yeah,
they out themselves. Okay. All right. Well, Carrie, I want to talk about your campaign because you have really been great at doing the research, finding out what's going on. You've testified in, locally and definitely in the legislature, at the state school board. So you decided to run so that we can have an excellent candidate. And we actually have a lot of really good candidates running. I feel like more than I can ever remember at one time.
right.
I'm very excited about that because you would have some great people to work with and you could really get some great things done and really, really change our education system. So, what can people do for you? What do you want us to know about your campaign?
Sure. Well, I think that this is a David and Goliath moment. There are a lot of people pushing back, but there are some wonderful people all across. I think it's 8 seats
Mhm.
that we could change. And
Right.
they're all people who are rising up for such a time as this.
There are.
They're
There's
not,
half of the seats plus one, like just slightly over half, are up for election. And we have a great candidate, and I think every one of them.
yes, we do. We do. And so what happened for me is parents and teachers were calling me and they were saying, we need this change. And it's got to be you. And I was just like, you know what? I don't have these letters behind my name. I don't I'm a mom. That's what I am. I'm a mom. I'm a para educator. I love kids. I mentor, but and I have this little podcast where I dig in and I try to let people know what's going on. And so I didn't I don't know. And then I had somebody who called me and said, I dreamt that the schools were burning down and you were standing on the street telling people, run. And and I think that that was kind of the push. And then Allison Robertson Oldham and I both decided that we would run, and we thought, well, we'll appeal to different groups. And I had no idea who I was going to appeal to. I am the girl next door. That's kind of my brand. And I had no idea how many people every single time those delegates are out there and their eyes just they go, I had no idea this was in our schools. And I don't spend time just smoozing. I literally teach a lesson when they come to my table. And so I'll have like 40 people. And it's going really, really well. And to the point that people were not signing for the incumbent signatures. But at the very last minute, a fundraiser, or not a fundraiser, but an event was done, and he was able to get those signatures. And I think it's sad because the people are recognizing that this isn't what it's not what they want. They don't want just nice. And I'm nice as well. Allison is nice as well. They don't just want nice. They want informed, and they want somebody who's going to protect rather than placate. And that's where we're at. We're at a place where you you have to understand that dignity is lost when you agree to the lie. And it doesn't matter what reason you agree to that lie. You lose your dignity when you agree to it. And I'm not willing to do that. Throw the arrows. I heard that someone said, if I get past convention, they will crush me. Okay. you know, I'm like, throw the arrows. My goal is to make
Mhm.
sure that people understand, and that parents know what's going on, because these are our precious children
Our
that are
precious
that are on
children.
the lines, and
It's
they
the
are.
future.
And the idea, because one of the ideas of postmodernism is that well, there is no truth but power, which is really, really frightening. And we do have a managerial class who feels that they know better for us and our families, just because they've fallen into certain places. they should be able to make the decisions for our class for us. And that's what Castle is. Castle is a bunch of people who believe that progressive ideology is what we should all be following. And so we're going to force your family to embrace it.
Absolutely.
That's really what it is. Okay, so yes, my campaign is going well. It's definitely David against Goliath kind of thing, but David wins.
That's right.
So yeah, and my campaign page is carry the number 4 Utah Kids, or sorry, UT Kids, carry for utkids.com. I do put up I have a Carry for UT Kids YouTube channel where I put up short videos explaining what's going on, which is huge for me because most of my things are an hour, but these are like under 2 minutes. And my goal is just parents, protect your kids, teachers, protect your kids, administrators, protect your kids. Our kids are being sold to SEL, to DEI, to things that will make them miserable, that will make mental health so much worse because they are being taught to look at life through a nihilistic lens. And so are our teachers. And I want to return the joy there. I want to take history and infuse it with the good stuff. That doesn't mean false stuff. It means
Absolutely.
Booker T. Washington. It means, it means the stories of people who've come to our country and made something of themselves. That's what our kids need to hear if we're going to preserve what we've got.
I love that. That's exactly right. Okay, so repeat your website.
Carry the number 4.
And I think we need to tell people that CARI.
Correct, yes.
CARI, the number 4.
UT Kids with an S at the end, .com.
.com. So CARI, the number 4, UT Kids, more than one, not just her kid, kids, all of our kids, .com.
That's
So
it.
go there, learn about Carrie. Be sure and share this. Like, share this video with people. Share, her name. Make sure. What district do you live in, Carrie?
I'm in District 13.
Okay.
We're actually having an ice cream social tonight. So if you're in District 13, which is the north end of the north end of Payson through the south end of Provo, and that includes Spanish Fork, Mapleton, Lakeshore, Springville, Payson, and Provo. Yes. So
Excellent.
Yeah, look it up, and the invitation's on there.
Yeah, because the state school board is it's about the size of 3 Senate districts, and a Senate district is very large, 29 across the entire state. And it's about 3 of them because there's only 15 members, and right now there's 8 up for election. So go on there. If you can donate something to Carrie, even if it's $10 or $15, go make a donation. Go share with anybody that you know that lives in those areas, and make sure people know we have a chance to take our education system back and really be in charge and really make a difference in our kids and their education and standing for our future and our freedom. Carrie, thank you so much. You've just been an amazing light, and we so appreciate you. I'm so grateful that you're running and that you're out there, and you're amazing. And thank you so much for being on our show today, and we wish you all the best. We really want you in there. So I'll follow my own advice.
Okay.
I'll go share it and make a donation, because
wonderful. Thank you.
I know that, it does add up. When people even just make small donations, it helps a lot and it makes a difference. And, if you're not running, please support someone who is, because they're throwing everything. They're spending so much time. They're making so many sacrifices. So use the power of discernment, do your research, vet the candidates, and then get behind those excellent candidates and go support them. Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us, Liberty Mom Carrie. And I want to remind everyone, you are the guardian of your liberty. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.